Okay, well, I've got 10 o'clock on my phone, which dictates everything I do. So why don't we go ahead and get started? Welcome, everybody. Happy late April and happy finally feels like spring day today. We're excited to have you. We've got a lot to get to today. This is a really, really, really important topic. We're talking about recklessly good, being recklessly good, in particular, innovation and customer experience in government. And we'll certainly talk about that term recklessly good. We'll spend some time talking about that. I do want to make a couple reminders. As you just heard Shane say, this is being recorded. That's important to note. Also, there's the closed captioning feature. For those of you that would benefit from that, please utilize that. But I want to, before we get into anything else, let you know that I'll be introducing Rich Saunders and Taylor Hone. I'm Dan Chase. I'm with the Division of Human Resource Management. And I'll get to introductions in a second, but I also want to talk about, as we do, both the beginning and the end of this one, what we'll be talking about next month, so you can start getting this on your calendar. May 31st, improving performance, what's your role as a supervisor? In particular, with all the emphasis on performance management, this performance management refresh, please plan on joining us on May 31st, 10 a.m. That's a Wednesday, last Wednesday of the month. Sydney Alton will be walking us through what we do if you've got an employee whose performance is not good enough. Okay, so I'll remind you of that again here in a second. But let's go back to what we're going to talk about today, and what it is that we want to try and accomplish, and what our objectives are for today. Again, this is recklessly good. Let me go ahead and introduce quickly, or have them introduce themselves. Because I think, Rich, you might not be familiar to a lot of people that are streaming this, who are actually on the Google Meet here. Rich currently operates as our Chief Innovation Officer, and Taylor worked with Rich. Rich, as we begin to talk about being recklessly good and innovation and customer experience, can you tell us what your role has been, the role of the Chief Innovation Office, and your role is in that CIO role?
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Can you hear me okay? Is my audio working?
Yep.
Okay, yeah, thank you all. And first of all, Dan, thank you for your leadership across the state. It's been a real pleasure working with you. We first got to know each other before the pandemic, and just really appreciate your leadership across the state. But my role started in 2021, June of 2021, and we've been kind of experimenting on how we can, as a state, kind of enhance the way that we function. My specific mission or charter as a senior advisor to Governor Cox, has been to lead efforts that point to giving the state an aggressive upgrade in terms of things like efficiencies and how we use innovations to be able to improve efficiencies, and especially the way we respond to the citizens and the customers in Utah. So it's been a pretty broad and a big and bold position, which is why we focus on things like customer experience and being recklessly good and innovative, because those are kind of systemic upgrades or changes to the state of Utah. And so my role has been involved in a lot of these initiatives and other key priorities of Governor Cox. So maybe I'll give Taylor just a second to share his role.
Yeah, thanks, Rich. Grateful to be able to work with Rich under his role, and some particular things that I manage for him is the customer experience project that is going on across the state that some of you may be familiar with and participating in, as well as helping Rich put together this innovation framework. And we'll talk a little bit about what that looks like today, and some opportunities for state employees to engage with some training opportunities that will help you learn more about how to be innovative in your daily work. So I'll leave with that, Rich.
Thanks, Taylor.
Okay. Well, thank you both, Rich and Taylor. Thank you for your work and your efforts in this regard. Again, let me say, folks listening, this is a seriously important topic. So let's talk specifically about what it is that we want to accomplish today in the short time that we have together. You'll notice 3 objectives. Taylor, if you want to advance that, what is it, this phrase, what is it that has caused so much consternation, this idea of recklessly good? We're going to clear that up. We're going to spend some time talking about what that means for you and me. as state employees, and why innovation is essential to good governance and improving the experience of our customers. And finally, maybe most importantly, as we talk about this cultural shift, what opportunities are going to be made available to you to help you in this effort that's coming down from Governor Cox. And now, Rich, let me pick your brain a little bit about this. As you know, I'm a public sector guy, and we hear a lot about innovation and other things. So I understand private sector, you've got to innovate. You've got to innovate, or it's adapt or die, is the old cliche. Why is it that we're hearing this from Governor Cox now? This idea of we've got to innovate, we've got to be innovative, we've got to be entrepreneurial in government. Why is he insisting that we incorporate that into our culture?
Yeah, thank you. And it's a brilliant question. And what Governor Cox is doing is brilliant as well. In the private sector, it's pretty sure that if you don't care about the customer experience and if you don't innovate, you will go out of business. And so given that the public sector doesn't have to innovate or care so much about the customer experience, the way that I like to look at it is the state kind of has a monopoly on the market. I mean, the state is the only one that can provide certain services, and this monopoly is funded by the people. And so we have to give a return on investment to the people that fund the operations of the state. We have more responsibility to be innovative and kind of go out there and figure out how to meet the needs of the customers. Even more so, I think it's an ethical obligation, somewhat, Dan. When I look at all of the technologies that are available, and just giving permission to think out of the box and to go where we need to go as we serve the people, just that permission to look at technology, to look at process change or whatever it takes, it just opens up the mind of to great possibilities. And I just think it would be irresponsible if we don't, in other words, we don't have the luxury of not innovating routinely, just because of that position that we hold in the state.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I love that idea that there's this ethical obligation. One of the reasons I call myself a public sector guy is because I love working with people that have this public service motivation. And so when you say there's this ethical obligation to always be figuring out better ways to serve the public, I think that certainly resonates with me. And it resonates with my experience working with state employees for 17 years now. They want that. This is an opportunity to serve the public even better. And there's an ethical responsibility to do it because of that public trust that we have, that monopoly that you talked about. But let me ask you this, because look, we throw a lot of buzzwords around, and innovation, there's always the risk that it becomes one of those buzzwords. Can you give us a little insight, what Governor Cox and what your office, what do we mean by innovation?
Yeah, that's great. So interestingly, there's an innovation out there that's evolving. It's artificial intelligence, and some people know it as Chat GPT at one level or another. And interestingly, I went to Chat GPT to ask it what the definition of innovation was, and it spit out a pretty good definition that we've been using as we've been approaching this across the state for the past couple of years. And I think on the screen there, it has this definition that innovation is the process, and I'm going to emphasize process, of creating new or improved products, services, or ideas. And I want to emphasize ideas, the process of creating new ideas that ultimately add value and solve problems for our customers. And this, you have to kind of go here that this involves identifying needs or opportunities and then developing kind of unique and creative solutions. Typically they would be practical and effective. Sometimes innovations might not seem practical, but maybe they're the right thing to do. But it's this opening up of the mind or processes that generate new ideas that can result in adding value. And when we've been doing this, we've been paying particular attention to the fact that there are many, many small improvements that can be made through innovations. And then there's those that are less frequent, which are big or more disruptive. Maybe a complete new idea or a technology that fundamentally changes everything. Innovation at whatever level is what we're after. And again, the emphasis, if you look at that definition, the result of innovation is that it adds value. And when we define value, one way that we've defined it, I think if we go to that next slide deck or that next slide on the deck there, Taylor, is value is created by removing a significant barrier for the customer in our current practice. And to the extent that government should influence, because government shouldn't be everywhere and do everything, but to the degree that government should, and also that value is pointed at advancing, the public good. So when I talk about innovation, and when we've been talking about it and aligning with the governor in his mind, this is kind of how we frame that, Dan.
Okay. Well, and I think something you're going to hear us talk about throughout our conversation this morning is you're going to hear us referring a lot to Governor Cox, everybody. And that's because, and that will start to seem repetitive as you've heard Rich talk about this, that's where this is coming from, right? His vision for this culture shift for the state. In fact, let me ask you this, because we hear about three things. So I really I love the idea that innovation, especially in the public sector, it's great by itself, but it's really only if it's adding value to the customer, right? If it's practical and effective. I think those terms are absolutely critical. We keep hearing about innovation. You've introduced customer experience, and then of course this phrase, recklessly good. Can you speak to us about the marriage of those three things that if any of us who have watched any of Governor Cox's videos that he sent to us or heard any of the things he's been saying recently, we've heard these terms. Synthesize those for us. How do they relate?
Yeah, let me take a stab at it, and other people might be able to do it better. But I mean, I would start from the foundation of this. Many of you have seen this study that came out that suggests that a single bad experience that a customer has with the state results in that person having a broad perspective or perception that the entire government is incompetent or bad. And this perception can lead all the way up to who's leading the state, our top even to the top level, our administration. And so it's important to recognize that people's experience with the state does matter, because we have some of the most competent, capable, talented, heart-giving people I've ever met in my life. And for people to perceive differently is wrong. And so when we look at the customer experience, that focus, what we're trying to do is elevate our service to be first in class to the people that we serve. We want people to get the services they need. We want for their experience to be with us to be first in class. But in order to do that, this customer experience focus includes customer feedback so that they can tell us how they perceive that their experiences are. And this opens up huge channels for feedback. Again, we're looking at innovation, which is this process of generating new ideas that help us to get better or to improve. And so this customer experience effort, caring about their experience, providing channels for their feedback, is a huge generator of ideas that help steer innovation, or in other words, those changes that take place that improve the way that we serve. Another huge channel, by the way, that we'll see a lot from I anticipate in coming months, is a huge channel for generating new ideas from our employees. They're the ones that deliver the service, and the customers are the ones that receive the service. And so if we can put those two channels or those troughs of feedback together, those will help drive innovation, which is this mechanism of change or improvement. And then you bring that third element in there, which is recklessly good. That's the mindset of how we go about doing this, how we go about innovation that intentionally engineers the customer experience to be more first in class. Mm-hmm. So does that answer kind of? I mean,
it does. I think it answers it really well. I think it probably raises another question, though, for people listening to this. I think everything you say, I see heads nodding, and people go, yeah, that's good. That's what we try and do. But yeah, if there's an elephant in the room, it's that phrase recklessly good that I think probably gives people the most heartburn. In any regulatory environment, bureaucratic environment, I think reckless is probably what gives people the most concern. Can you speak to that? What, because that could come across as a negative when the governor says be recklessly good. Can you give us more insight into that?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. It's a difficult one to answer. It really is. But I think as we talk together, we'll kind of cultivate some concepts that hopefully people can take away the principles of what the governor is meaning. And I think he has intentionally chosen the word reckless, but it's never used by itself. It's always accompanied with the word good. And the blending of these two words is integral to what the governor's trying to accomplish. And I don't think we're going to have all the answers to everybody's unique, nuanced situation. And I think it'll take a lot of discussion outside of this discussion to really cultivate it and what it means and looks like in each agency or even at the program level, because it's going to vary. It might look different across the state. But hopefully today we'll shed some light on this. And it's a big ask. And proud of Governor Cox and the chief for taking this on. And I think as we start to talk about what does this really mean, let's put a little video. I think we have a little video clip of the governor speaking himself and using words that we can kind of talk about after the video segment. So let's cue up that video.
Too often, government is seen as too bureaucratic, too slow, or too big to do new things or to adapt to the needs of citizens, businesses, and visitors. Now, I get that government has important checks and balances that often slow things down compared to the private sector. We need to respect that in order to be responsible with taxpayer dollars. At the same time, Utah's entrepreneurial spirit has made our state's economy the best in the nation, and I'd like to bring more of that spirit into state government. In state government, many of our processes, systems, and codes work well now, and we should keep those in place, but others might benefit from a challenge to the status quo. As a state employee, I invite you to routinely look at your role from a customer's perspective and use a creative and resourceful mindset to explore how to serve them better. If so, let's be creative, agile, resourceful, and innovative. We need you to be recklessly good. Being recklessly good means thinking outside the box to help customers solve their problems. It means being bold as we implement new solutions that enhance the customer experience. It also means there's a risk of failure, but we can be successful if we act with competence and integrity, learn quickly from our mistakes, and pivot when needed.
That's interesting. And that's, so, you know, when I think about being recklessly good, of course, I go to the person who has kind of introduced this. And those are some of the phrases that the governor has used when he's introduced this. By the way, that video was sent to everybody back on February 3rd, I believe. There may be a combo of a couple of video segments there. But, you know, I've interacted a lot with the governor and the chief on this. And I think that the main things that I take away kind of principally when I think about what they're trying to accomplish is that we need to open our eyes and remove needless layers of bureaucracy that get in the way of serving the state. We need to be kind of a little more self-aware or conscientious about why we have these jobs. What is the purpose? What's the why behind our job? And remove some of the clutter that covers up our real purpose. And I think when our real purpose gets clouded with needless policy or procedures that get in the way, it kind of takes the love out of the service that we have. And I think he's asking us to be conscientious of that and eliminating things that are just plain nonsense that just shouldn't exist. And within guardrails, and we'll talk about guardrails in a minute, challenge the process, the procedure, the methodologies in order to get better. Challenge the status quo, because when we challenge the status quo, that's what creates opportunity for improvement and openness. And there's a quote on the screen here that comes from Governor Cox when he first took office. This was him speaking as when he assumed the role of governor. He's saying to his people, to his leaders, challenge everything. just because it's always been done that way doesn't mean it should still be done that way. Constantly examine everything we do and allow for new ideas, and creativity can transform our work and bless our state. He wants to boldly, for each of us to boldly imagine how things could be in their ideal state, and then strive for how close can we get to that. So when we're talking about recklessly good, I think he wants that type of boldness. He's not suggesting that we abandon our statutory responsibilities, or he's suggesting. He's not suggesting that we abandon those responsibilities and reinvent everything. I want to be very clear about that. But he is saying, look at things and be willing to challenge them if they seem off or out of true north to what we should be providing to the customers. And as he said in the video clip, he just wants the state of Utah at all levels to be more agile, more responsive, more resourceful, more creative, more innovative in how we serve. And I think that's what he means by recklessly good. And sometimes that means we're going to have to break with tradition and do away with stuff as it has always been, because it just isn't the way it should be today. So those are some thoughts, Dan, as we start to kind of understand and peel away the layers on this recklessly good concept.
Yeah, that video, I've seen that video more than twice. Let's put it this way, probably more than most. And it just dawned on me now that he's starting to give synonyms for what, and you just gave him again, for what he means by recklessly good. And so, folks listening to this, please, please, please don't get hung up on the choice of word. If reckless is not your favorite choice of words for what we're describing, don't worry about it. You heard other synonyms there. And I love the point, Rich, that you never hear reckless. Governor Cox never said, hey, go be reckless by itself, right? It's always, it's only as a descriptor for recklessly good, right? Resourceful, innovative, being curious, thinking outside of the box, all those kinds of things. So let's say we know, right? Just in modern parlance, there's good reckless, there's bad reckless for sure. But there's good reckless and bad reckless. Can you give it? We were talking the other day, Rich. Can you about some metaphors? Now we always go to sports metaphors too quickly, yeah. Probably. Would you give us some of what we talked about the other day?
Yeah, we couldn't avoid going to the sports metaphors. It's where we always gravitate, but it's really applicable. I mean, so I've got a couple that maybe I'll just try to tee up here that we talked about, and you can help me develop them as we go. But the one comes from Governor Cox. He's got a baseball story that he shares, and I'm going to quote him. He says, "We will make mistakes, but I want them to be mistakes of commission. In other words, in the act of trying, not omission." He said, "The maddest I ever saw my dad at me while playing baseball was when I struck out looking." We're going to strike out, but let's make sure that we always strike out swinging. So, the analogy there is being recklessly good means you're taking a chance. You're trying to do what's right. When the ball comes across the plate and it's a strike, take a stab at it. Try to hit it. I mean, you're not going to get anywhere by just standing there watching it, right? So it's kind of an action, an invitation to action when we talk about good reckless. Yeah. So
that would be good, because it's still within the course of the game, right? That's good reckless. Yeah, swing for the ball. You're not, striking out's not ideal, but he wants us to be active, actively engaged in what we're doing. So that's good reckless then. I bring this up because I've got a son who's starting baseball, and I'm worried about him charging the mound with the bat. That's not within the rules of the game, right? That would be bad reckless. That would be a clear violation of what we're doing. So again, we're seeing this distinction. Good reckless, recklessly good happens within us trying our best, knowing the guardrails, knowing the rules, knowing that what we're trying to accomplish. Does that sound right to you?
It does, and it's hard because so much of the culture that exists kind of doesn't really promote this stepping out in and taking a shot at it or taking a chance. And let's go to the basketball analogy that we talked about. Is I have a son who plays at a Division I level right now, and I've spent thousands of hours in the gym with him, we talk about, his biggest fear was, well, what if I make a mistake, or shoot a shot and miss it. And I finally said to him, you know, you're going to miss shots. In fact, you're going to miss more shots than you ever make. And it's just going to be that way. But if you don't take the shots, you're never going to make anything. So you're going to have to go out on a limb and take a risk. And one thing too is about the game in general that we talked about is aggressive mistakes are good mistakes. That's good reckless, because you're out there trying to figure out how to help your team win the game and perform at the top level, as opposed to a mistake that's done by just being sloppy or unprepared or lazy or timid. It's just such a difference in the kind of reckless that we're talking about. And so there's good shots to take in basketball and there's bad shots. And I think, as you said, in the frame of baseball, likewise, you generally have to work within the structure that's established by the coach. But here's the thing is within that structure, you should be able to read the situation and be trusted to make adjustments based on the situation, because in your judgment, you think it's the right thing to do. And sometimes in doing that, we're going to take some shots and we're going to miss some shots. And even sometimes we're going to end up taking a bad shot when we should have taken a good shot, a better shot. It's going to happen, but we need to kind of, the culture needs to be a little more tolerant of those types of efforts. And so I think what the governor is striving for is to take the good shots, take them with confidence, swing the bat when the ball comes in, and sometimes it means even if it's close to the strike zone, you're going to have to strike at it, but swing the bat with confidence. And if we miss, that's okay. Let's learn and move forward. And one more thing, Dan, if I could, I've talked too long, but I just want to say that this speaks to the kind of culture that's needed in state government if we're going to be successful at this. What happens, and I'll ask you this, Dan, what happens when you shoot a shot and the coach pulls you out because you missed the shot? What happens to your confidence?
I'm glad you brought that. Just deflating, right? And I think about this with, we'll talk more about the manager's role in all of this, but my understanding of innovation is that the primary source, if I'm going to be innovative, creative, recklessly good, and I'm going to have customer experience, bring solutions to customers, that doesn't happen without motivation. And if I'm making the right kinds of mistakes, as funny as a phrase that is, we'll work with managers to help them recognize the right kinds and keeping their people from being the bad reckless, because that's what we need to fix, because nothing is more deflating than I was trying to do something good. I think it's within the guardrails, and yet I'm getting poo-pooed for it. I'm getting, or whatever else it might be. That's deflating.
It is. And it makes, I think what it does is, and it's hard, and this is why we need to learn together how to do this in our culture, but we do need to learn. We need to enable the culture to take a step forward. And if in the effort, the supervisor sidelines a misstep, that's a sure way to shut people down. And so just knowing that, and knowing that people become hesitant to even shoot the ball or take a chance, it puts people in a state of non-trusting. And not just themselves, but management and maybe even the culture. And it just destroys the confidence and creativity that we desperately need in the state. We need the minds and the creativity of our people. And so we have to cultivate this environment where these ideas can freely flow. And then within a certain framework, we advance those ideas to actual change. And I think that when we nail this, I would be so bold as to say that it impacts retention and employee satisfaction, because everybody loves it when we're successful. They hate it when we fall short. But we've got to figure out how to work at this tough tension together.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I think it does impact motivation levels, commitment levels, therefore retention, all that kind of stuff. I think too, let me say something. I think this is going to sound, we're talking about this new initiative. Well, the fact that government needs to be innovative or whatever is not new, right? This has always been the case. It's a re-emphasis. And what I would say too, Rich, and tell me if I'm misspeaking here, when we talk about culture, we're not talking about a cultural revolution here in government. In fact, this is happening. This is happening in the state. We've got people that are so desperate, hardworking, sacrificing, service-oriented professionals that are looking for the best ways within the guardrails to serve their people. This is a matter of making it more a part of our culture. I think a lot of people are doing this and they're doing it successfully.
I agree. One of the privileges that I have in this position is to work across the entire state. And literally, I am in awe at some of the people that are doing this. I mean, it's an incredible sight to see. It's happening. But what we're trying to do is amplify this message of the governor and really try to deepen this mindset in our culture, because the governor really wants this mindset to prevail throughout the executive branch. And so this is kind of an effort to amplify and kind of elevate that effort and that mindset.
Well, and I think everyone who signed up, certainly I know the email from Chief Pierpont, everyone who signed up should have received a link to a charter that was created for everyone in the state to show the seriousness that this is not just a whim, right? There's some concretion to this. There's some serious thinking to this. Where did that charter come from? Can you speak to us a little bit about that charter?
I think that's important. I kept hearing the governor say, let's go be recklessly good. Let's do this. Let's change the world together. And I think that's his mindset. And I kept thinking, I don't know that people, especially clear at the front line, know how to do this safely or even will dare to do it. And if we don't have them, we don't have, the whole picture, and their role in this is critical. And so I just asked the governor and the chief of staff, can we kind of build this out a little bit? And so I spent many months out visiting with each of the executive leadership teams across the state, and we collected their feedback. We were asking questions like, well, what are the fears or the concerns or challenges that you see will happen if we try to kind of bring this culture, this behavior into our culture? What are some principles that you feel like if we adhered to, that we could do this more successfully? And so, just pages and pages of notes and feedback from them. We distilled it down into basically some key principles, and then sharing some of the biggest challenges that they felt would be in the way. And so that's kind of where it came from. It was a very long, I think it took us like 7 or 8 months to get all this put together. And then we created a charter, put it back out to the executive leadership teams for additional feedback on kind of the synthesized version. And this is where we're at today with it.
And I love that, because so folks listening to this on the live stream or actually in the Google Meet, this shows you where it came from, right? Now, this is not a Rich Saunders creation. This is not it comes from Governor Cox, and then this is information from your agency leaders and their thoughts on this, right? That Rich and his team have synthesized here in this document. I noticed there's maybe an extrapolated or principles, guiding principles from the document. Can you speak to those at all? There it is.
Yeah, and we won't take time to go through all of them, but in all of that feedback that we gathered, and then we ran this up to the chief, and the governor's eyes were on this to kind of, is this where we want to land for now? It won't be maybe where we end up in years to come, but it's where we're starting from. These key principles, in order to be successful, include things like, how do we put the customer first and have the mindset that we're actually here to serve them? Another principle that you can see on the list there is how important it is that in this effort, we understand our mission, our values, and our roles, and then we align with those when we do. That's what helps this effort to be safer, is that we're always, that's that framework we talked about in the basketball and the baseball analogy. You're working within that framework. That's an example of how you would do that. The other thing that they came up with, there was a lot of concern about, going rogue, and, we're just going to go, everybody's just going to go challenge everything, and where is it all going to go? And so one of the things that was commonly expressed was that we need to have some guardrails articulated, even at the agency or clear down at the program level, that give employees permission and a supportive framework to actually challenge the status quo, try new ideas, and scale the successes. And it's interesting, because some people think of guardrails as the things to stop this, but it's not. These guardrails should be designed to open the way and allow us to go into that new frontier with this culture. One more principle that I'll just draw out is it's important that we use data whenever we can to identify areas needing improvement, which is why we open up these channels to our customers to give us information, and we look at common themes and trends so that we can use data to help identify the improvement needs. And so anyway, that's an example. You can see on the screen there some of the others, but this is kind of the set of principles that came out of those discussions.
Well, let me, I appreciate that. I think the principles are helpful. Let me speak first. So I look at my screen now, I see a John Strong, Lad Bunting, Judy Ann Collins, Laura Braden. Let me speak for them for a second, because I imagine there are people that their challenges or concerns, and I think you've accounted for that on this document. You've given opportunity for people to express those concerns or those challenges. If I'm an employee or a supervisor, and I'm hearing this culture shift that's coming, can you speak to those concerns and challenges that have been brought to your attention?
Yeah, and realize this is not a comprehensive list of every possible concern or challenge, but these are the most common that came from the executive leadership teams. Just a quick flyby on those. That time was a concern or a challenge. Who has the time to do this? The demand on me is so strong. How can I detach from my load to innovate or to engage this way? Another one was lack of control over resources. And what's the incentive to do so? Because I mean, I have no control over my budget. Let's just say I implement a savings, and that savings lands back in our agency only to be taken away by the powers that be. So what's the incentive? And we don't have any control over the resources. And let's just say that the innovation requires more resources. And sometimes we feel like we don't have control over that. So that was another concern. I'll tell you, well, let me go through two more, and then I'm going to back up and talk about the greatest challenge that came. Fear of failure or being called out in an audit as being kind of labeled as irresponsible and kind of blacklisted. That was a big one. And the last one was, we have such a siloed culture in the state. It makes collaboration that's needed to get systemic changes. It makes for a challenge, and so that will be hard. So those are kind of the four main challenges or concerns that were expressed. But I want to just emphasize, because this is now getting into talk about the big elephant in the room. The biggest challenge, I mean, everybody can guess it. It's the fear of failure, or the fear of making mistakes, the fear of being called out in an audit. Hey Taylor, go back one slide just for a minute, because I want to take a minute before we go to that slide to talk about some feedback that we've received from the employees about fear of failure and making mistakes, or fear of being called out in an audit. If I could, this is interesting. And what we did is we put this charter out and asked for everybody to give feedback on it. And we're grateful for those that expressed that feedback. And I want to share this because as managers or supervisors, it's important to understand kind of what people are thinking as we talk about this culture. So I'm just going to kind of really quickly read through some of these. Number one comment, I need some assurance that I can be innovative, recklessly good, and push back against the status quo and leave with my job at the end of the day. I feel like I have absolutely 100% the opposite now. Another comment, how can workers be sure they're not going to be retaliated against if they bring up concerns or complaints? And where should these complaints be brought so that it can be done safely, is what I'm interpreting from that. Another one is, what suggestions can we give to our staff to bring these new ideas to an upper management who seem to be closed off to much of what has been stated in the recklessly good vision? Another one, I desperately wish these ideas would actually be implemented, but from my experience, those in charge will never let it happen. Another comment, I'm trying really hard to be positive about this new initiative, but I'm really struggling. It looks great on paper, but it does not work in practice. Interesting. A couple more, 2 or 3 more. I've spoken to many of my coworkers who also feel like they are drowning. We can provide solutions that would at minimum send us a life preserver. However, getting approval for those solutions is not easy. Another one, it feels like we're putting employees in an impossible situation, or in the end, we're just giving lip service to an idea that we've made impossible to carry out because of what's in statute. Another one, how are we to comply with giving the customer what they want while working around our statutes, policies, and common sense? Line employees are unlikely to put much faith in the concept if they're worried about how guardrails and prudence might be used as management weapons if they make a mistake. So Dan, isn't that interesting? Those comments?
And not unreasonable, right? I mean, these people are not just whining. They're not just, and that's part of that culture shift that has to happen in an old culture. It's hard to argue with that feeling. What about this idea of, let's take the big one here. What if I fail? What if so I'm swinging and I strike out, but I don't trust my manager, or what happens if I fail? What are your thoughts on that? Very reasonable, I think, from our folks.
Absolutely reasonable. Absolutely. And that's the big issue right now that we've got to collectively figure out how to work through. Let me go to the next slide, Taylor, if you would. This is what the Governor Cox said. He said, "We hired you because you're the best. We want you to be innovative and make decisions. We didn't bring you on to preserve the status quo or run out the clock," in our sports analogy. Yeah, I hate it when teams play not to lose instead of playing to win. It makes such a difference. Most teams that play not to lose end up losing. But we trust you to make decisions, and we'll do everything we can to back those decisions. Now, picture if that phrase, "we trust you to make decisions, and we'll do everything we can to back those decisions," picture if that was cultivated all the way through the organization, and we work together to figure out how to do that safely. You don't need to come to us for everything. You can answer the following questions. If you can answer the following questions, then you don't need my permission. Is it in your budget? Is it likely to make bad headlines? Does it improve lives, especially families? Can the private sector do it better? Would Widow Madsen support it? And many of you know the Widow Madsen thing. When he first became mayor, one of his, what he calls 6 employees, told him that every day if he asked himself if Widow Madsen, the sweetest lady in the town living on a fixed income, would be proud of him and support what he was doing. And he said, "I've never forgotten that. And everybody knows someone like Widow Madsen. We don't waste taxpayer money if we think of her." I just think one more comment on this in terms of what if we fail. This is where we really need the support of everyone as we try to elevate this culture. There's one more quote that I want to bring up really quickly on this topic. We will all make mistakes," says Governor Cox. "I will, and so will you. Take responsibility quickly, apologize, and we will move on together. Forgiveness is foundational." So this is a big deal. And I don't even know where all this will be able to flesh out correctly in a healthy way, but it's going to require mercy in both directions, upward and downward on the line of command. And it's going to also require that we bring our very best game. Dan, I want to say, back in November of 2021, the governor launched the One Utah, or made an announcement about the One Utah Health Collaborative. And you talk about an example of being recklessly good. In that very launch, huge risks involved, collaborating the entire health system in the state of Utah. I remember right over the pulpit, he said, "We might fail, but we have to try to fix this glaring health problem. We have to. So if we fail," basically is what he was saying, "if we fail, let's fail trying to fix this." And one other thing is this very effort about this culture of innovation and being recklessly good and focusing on the customer experience, even that in and of itself is a prime demonstration of the governor being recklessly good. Can you imagine about all of the possible points of failure when we do this at scale? But think about the outcomes that can result if we can work this together. The outcome will be transformational for the state, and flat out, it's not responsible. It's actually irresponsible if we don't do this. Anyway, I've talked too much, Dan. Back to you.
No. Go ahead and advance a slide if you would. I think that's a good point. This idea of guardrails, and we don't want to spend too much time talking about this, but I love the point you made earlier, and we'll touch upon this more. But this idea of guardrails are there to help us, they're to protect people in their efforts to be innovative, rather than sort of this Wild West sort of you can do whatever you want kind of a thing. The guardrails established by management, by the administration, by the organization, whatever it is, those things are saying within those guardrails, please be as innovative as you can, right? And partly, if you'll advance the slide, you'll learn about this in some of the workshops, but it's the organization's job to provide guardrails. It's trying to connect knowledge of the political implications of guardrails with the street level knowledge of where customers meet. So we're not going to spend a ton of time on this right now, because you'll get it more later as we introduce this topic more fully. But I want people to understand that guardrails are our friend. They're good. They help us. They are empowering as we try to be more innovative. But I've got to go back to one more concern, and quickly here, Rich, and that is this idea, another elephant in the room. Anybody who has been through the audit experience is like, I don't want to go through that. No thanks, right? What about being audited? Is that a legitimate concern?
Yeah, and I'll try to be quick here because we're running short on time. But I spent some time with Cade Minchie, our Auditor General for the OLAG, the Office of Utah Legislative Auditor General, and talked about this. I think they're coming up with a best practices manual for the state of Utah, and in that manual there's a section on innovation, and they actually plan to incorporate these principles from this charter. They are so supportive of this effort. He even said to me, we're going to look for it. We're going to help to try to recognize it in a positive way. It's a part of what we do. You can see the quote there on the screen. But I think in principle, the OLAG is wanting to help elevate this culture of the governor, and to do it through their audits, actually call it out. I was the head of the Department of Health for a while, and we were called out for not being innovative enough. I mean, it's real. They want innovation to occur because that's how, as it says in the quote there, that's how we make things happen in a positive way. One other thing about audits really quickly is the value of our internal auditors, and their ability to join in innovation and being recklessly good in a strong way. They might have to adjust some of their mindsets because typically they're completely risk averse, and I don't know, but they're so helpful and can be so helpful in this process if they can kind of help cross-check and make sure in whatever guardrails we put forward that we can safely do this, but at the same time opening the channel to go forward rather than shutting it down. It's easy for any auditor to say, if we eliminate all risk, we'll have no problem, so shut everything down. But that's not what we're after. We're after intelligent, competent guidance from these excellent internal auditor positions as well.
So, Rich, my team, of course, right now, many of you know, we've got this another culture, part of this culture shift, another aspect to it is every emphasis on performance management and pay for performance. So we're beating the streets, training, doing things like that on pay for performance. Can you talk about this idea? Do we have examples of what's the relationship? If I'm a supervisor, I'm like, crap, I've got to do all this. I've got to recognize employees more fully now. What is the dynamic between innovation, recklessly good, and pay for performance, for example?
And I don't know the exact answer, but in principle, I think if we're going to bring this into our culture, then we need to bring it into our culture.
Yeah.
And I think it has a place in the performance evaluations, and rewarding innovation and being recklessly good should play a key role in the development of our culture. In fact, I mean, we've got a little video that we've created. It's about 5 minutes long. And it's Governor Cox actually recognizing some individuals across the state who have done this, and he's sending a signal with this video and this recognition that he wants to do this more often. He'll also introduce an innovation and recklessly good coin, recognition coin. So Taylor, let's cue up that quickly if we could.
Hi team. Our state government is one of the best in the nation, and we're getting even better as we elevate our focus on customer experience, innovation, and being recklessly good, something you've heard me talk about in recent months. As I mentioned in one of my previous messages, we will continue to learn together how to apply the principles outlined in our Recklessly Good Charter, which was recently shared with you by email. This off-the-shelf training is one example of how we are learning together. Many of you already exemplify this innovative and entrepreneurial spirit, and we are on the lookout for examples of this being done throughout our state. I'm excited to introduce a new recognition coin that will be used to spotlight those that demonstrate these principles as they serve our incredible customers. The first recipients of the Innovation and Recklessly Good coin are Pat Rainbolt, Brian Tober, and Murris Persis, 3 members of our One Utah team who have been noticed for their innovative, out-of-the-box approach to providing exceptional customer service. Let's hear their stories.
My name is Murris Persis. I'm the Assistant Director at Eligibility Services Division for the Utah Department of Workforce Services. I'm here representing Team MyCase that encompasses Workforce Services and Division of Technology Services employees. For over 1 million users, MyCase is a portal for customers who interact with EREP, eligibility system in Utah, that serves roughly 1 out of 7 Utahns with public assistance programs and Medicaid. We knew that majority of our MyCase users access the tool using the mobile device. However, MyCase was not very mobile friendly. Along with our partners in DTS, the team has spent the last year redesigning MyCase, heavily based on consumer and partner feedback. In addition to the launch of the progressive web application element for MyCase that makes the system mobile friendly, this new version is also more intuitive and easier to navigate. On February 1st, DWS launched a new version of MyCase. So far, we had over 90,000 successful MyCase logins since launch. We will continue to make improvements to MyCase to make it a preferred method of interaction for all things eligibility. For example, we wanted to help our customers expedite their eligibility decisions as well. To enable this, on April 1st, we also launched another MyCase enhancement that allows customers to upload documents, making those documents immediately available to the worker and expediting eligibility decision. An overview of the changes and video have been created to guide users. MyCase is accessible at jobs.utah.gov/MyCase.
My name is Pat Rainbolt, and I'm a Wildlife Program Manager with the Utah Department of Natural Resources. Some months ago, there was a private citizen who wanted to landscape his property in rural Utah. However, he had a problem. A state-owned fence that bordered his property line had fallen into disrepair and made his landscaping project vulnerable. This property owner reached out to the Division of Wildlife for help. An obvious solution, sending someone to repair the fence, wasn't initially an option due to resource constraints. However, through some creativity and resourcefulness, we proposed this solution. If the property owner could fix the fence himself, the DWR could reimburse him for the cost at a later date. This solution helped the landowner quickly remedy the problem at a reduced cost to the state. Ultimately, we helped the property owner meet his needs and have a positive experience with the state.
My name is Brian Tober, and I am a state agency librarian for the Utah State Library. We realized a few years back that we needed to provide better information to our customers, including public libraries across the state through our existing library directory. The problem was we didn't have a particular solution that we could use as a replacement. With that in mind, there are a couple things you pick up if you're a librarian long enough. First one is, as long as you have the ability to find the right information, you don't need to know all the information. And another is a DIY mentality when you don't have an unlimited budget. During my research for a replacement, I was made aware of a plugin that looked like it might be able to do exactly what we wanted. And with a one-time cost of only $39, it was an easy decision to purchase it, especially in comparison to some options that were significantly more expensive. After some initial testing on our staging site, we were able to create a new directory that is much better suited for our needs and the needs of our customers, the patrons. Now, I'm also very lucky to work in an environment that not only allows collaboration between divisions, but actively encourages it. So when another division in our department was in a similar situation, we were able to work together using the same inexpensive solution to fit their needs.
Thanks, Pat, Brian, and Murris. Well done. It is so important that we provide first-in-class service to our customers, and we'll continue looking for and recognizing those who exemplify this kind of innovative and out-of-the-box service. Managers and supervisors, you are the leaders of many of our teams throughout the state. As such, you will have the most significant impact on whether we can become more customer-focused, creative, agile, resourceful, and innovative. Please become familiar with the principles in the Recklessly Good Charter and help your team members have the space to practice and adopt these principles. Thanks for your dedication and great service to the state of Utah.
Oh, that's great. It's a little long, but man, really, really important perspectives on that. So Taylor, thanks for queuing that up. I think we need to transition quickly, but do we have for those that want to recommend or draw attention to those Taylor, can you just talk to where this is so people can make recommendations of who should receive or potentially receive a recognition coin?
Yeah, absolutely. We would love to have some submissions of those that that might have done something that is worth recognizing from the governor's standpoint. You can find that on gopb.utah.gov, going to the results management tab. Some of you may be familiar with the EPIC committee that works on process improvement, and we've added this plugin to that page that you can click and submit someone's name to be recognized as an innovator.
Thank you. Look for your recommendations. And I think if we could just take just a couple of minutes and talk about these workshops that we've been designing, that would be good. Dan, do you think you and Taylor could talk about those for a minute?
Yeah, Taylor, go ahead. Everyone, if you're on, if you can stay on because you need to hear about this. We're not going to leave you without tools here. So if you can hang on for a second, I want you to hear from Taylor about what it is that this office is going to provide you in terms of helping you manage all of this and understand this process more. Go ahead, Taylor, if you would, please.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. And I'll try to be brief here. So I've seen a lot of comments in the chat about, how does this actually happen in practice? And what do I actually do, and how do I work with my manager to be able to have space to innovate and potentially fail? And the governor referenced that there would be training opportunities and learning opportunities where we could learn together about how to apply these principles within state government. And so, working with Rich, we've set up, and an outside consultant, we've set up these 2 different workshops that we wanted to make you aware of. This first we're calling a recklessly good training. And this recklessly good training is meant to be an educational type of training where we are seeking to help state employees learn skills and a framework for thinking through solutions to problems in ways that can help you understand the broader issue and then frame solutions in a way that works for all of your stakeholders. And so, Dan referred to the idea of guardrails. This framework hopefully puts you within those types of guardrails where you're taking good shots that Rich referred to earlier. This would be like a large group setting, similar to this off the shelf today. And after the training, you would be given access to a workbook. And the workbook would walk you through kind of a way of thinking about your issue and to be able to answer some questions to help you to think broader and eventually get to the point where you can think about a solution and how you might implement it in your specific team or agency. After the workshop, you could then sign up for the second workshop that we're talking about, which is what we're calling an innovation lab. And this would be more of a small team setting where you'd actually bring your team. An example of this is we actually just met with the UDFI group that works with small business examiners. And so it was a group of about 6 or 7 people that we did this practice workshop with. And we talked about their process of examining small businesses and some complications that they were seeing with that. And the purpose of the workshop was to help them to gain a deeper understanding of the issue, to think about it in different ways, to then identify a specific solution to address it, and then to develop a plan together on how to implement the solution. And so, like I said, this is a small group sitting with a facilitator, and you work through that workbook together to answer the questions. And this is some of the feedback as we've done this with practice groups. This is the value that they've seen come out of these innovation labs. The first here is, it's helpful to have an outside facilitator who can push you deeper on the problem and its potential solutions. So somebody that's not, just working directly with your team. I think one of the quotes the UDFI group gave us was, if you created the process, it's hard for you to change it. And so it's helpful to have somebody else that's not familiar with it to come in and begin asking you questions about it and help you think about it in a different way. The second is, Rich referred to this as the challenge of time, that these workshops can give you a space. Like they said, we needed this set time to get together as a team to talk about a specific issue, because normally we just don't make time to do that. You're busy with just keeping things going. And then finally, the workbook encourages you to think about the ideal state and challenges the tradition of why you do what you do. And that kind of goes back to the governor's vision of, being bold and challenging the status quo. And so more information will come out about these workshops and also how you can participate. So look out for that in the near future, and you'll be able, these obviously won't be required, but as you and your teams are interested, you'd be welcome to participate. With that, Dan, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Taylor. Everyone, don't panic. This is a kickoff meeting. This is to introduce you to a cultural shift. There is more information coming. This is coming directly from Governor Cox. Before we let you go, please, you've got a lot of reminders for next month's very hands-on, very practical, off-the-shelf on what happens when you've got someone who's underperforming. How do you address that? How do you improve their performance? Next month, May 31st, please sign up for that. Sydney Alton will be leading that discussion. But thank you, everybody. Again, this is a long-term culture shift we're talking about. Rich, I'll leave the last word to you.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, everyone. Patience. This is not a flavor of the day. This is a long-term change to state government. And I'm looking forward to seeing the outcomes and the results from your great work. Thank you for all that you do. Pleasure to work with you.